Hey there, I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. To say that the world has changed over the last 100 years or so could quite possibly be the understatement of all time. I mean, the rapid evolution of technology has literally transformed the way we as humans see, feel, and interact with the world around us in virtually every conceivable way. It's reached a point, in fact, in which human life and living and our collective existence is actually starting to blend deeply into digital realms not seen or experienced to this point. And the difference between these two worlds is increasingly more and more difficult to discern. Some may be ringing alarm bells for how this level of tech could be used in nefarious ways. Others are ecstatic over the possibilities of what this could all mean to the advancement of culture, art, and the redefining of the human experience. Well, on today's show, we have a guest who is part of a front that is leading the charge into this new and altered reality. Welcome to the show. So, Sarah Giusto is a producer artist at OWL Inc., a Tokyo-based firm specializing in the production of virtual humans. Yeah, you heard that right, virtual humans. And the company and their projects crisscross between art, culture, and commerce. IMA, the firm's flagship model, is also Japan's first virtual model. With her easily identifiable and signature pink bob, she's collaborated with top artists and brands. Ima is Asia's #1 influential virtual human, and her actions have led to her being selected one of the Women of the Year in 2020 by Forbes Women, and one of the Japan representatives for the Tokyo Paralympics opening ceremony. Now, in being part of such a unique offering, Sarah finds herself busy with PR, content strategy, and speaking at various international events and locations such as ComplexCon and MIT, to note a couple. As for Sarah herself, with an upbringing defined by formative experiences in both Japan and Canada, and a resultant heightened sensitivity and awareness to the world around her, this role in producing virtual humans for the metaverse aligns well. So with all that stated, Sarah, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing good, thank you. That was amazing intro. Said it way better than me as anytime.
Well, I've been super excited for this talk. Just the whole premise of what you do, what the company you work for does. It just sort of like blows me away. And I think, I'm excited for it for myself, but I'm also excited for listeners to kind of just hear this for the first time if they have no idea about any of this, because I think it's just going to blow everybody's mind. So yeah. Thanks for taking some time and coming on today.
Thank you. It is, I think, mind-boggling. I tried, I get asked all the time, it's like, what's your job, right? Like at a
Yeah,
dentist appointment or something. Like I take like, it's like, at least give me 30 minutes to explain what I do, because like you're not gonna
exactly.
understand if
Right.
I say I make virtual humans. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I do. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, without further ado, why don't we just jump right into it here? I
Do
do
it.
have the first segment lined up, and it's something called Coloring Wikipedia. And it's basically a segment where I just kind of try to add some zest to some otherwise dry definitions of what professions or industries are about. And also, too, I think it's like a nice launching pad into the discussion. Sometimes these definitions that I read off from Wikipedia, they hit and they're on, and
Oh,
other times they're just
for
flat
sure,
out
for
off,
sure.
right? So I do have a bit of bad news, though, unfortunately. And strangely enough, Wikipedia does not have an entry for a virtual human producer. I don't know. I don't know if you believe that or not, but who would have thought? But I did a little bit of internet sleuthing here, and I did come up with like a general enough definition of producer from a career website, ipa.co.uk. So I'm just going to go with that. And just let me read that off for you, and maybe afterwards you can comment. Does it sound
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here we go. Producer. The producer is responsible for taking the agreed creative idea and bringing the client's wishes to life on air and or on screens and on other channels. This role requires strong TV film craft and combines big ideas and creative problem solving. The producer is aware of emerging and current talent to engage the best suppliers for each project. They manage the entire production process from idea to execution, working in partnership with the client, creatives, account team, and manage the production and post-production process. They also manage the budget for each project and negotiate with the pre and post-production companies. A bit of a mouthful, but first take, what do you think of that?
I think it fits the general definition of producer. I think it's just like what I do at the company, and this has been questioned every day in my company as well. It's like, what do
Yeah.
you put on my business card?
Right.
I think because it's also a startup,
Yeah.
it's only been in existence for like 3 years. We're still building a lot of things, and it's like
Hmm.
I joined when the team was only like 5 people, and now
Wow.
it's literally like 50 people. And at that point, when it's literally like 5 people, you're literally doing everything
Yeah.
that you don't have people for. So
Right.
yeah, I
Right.
think the general definition of producer is a part of what I do. For example,
Yeah.
like I would literally, look over budgeting, I would look over the creatives, I would look over
Mm.
how that's going to be executed, but that's literally like I think a cake slice of the whole cake of
Yeah.
what I actually do.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. Yeah.
and
What
I
What
think
would
like
you add to it?
I would add everything. Literally everyone,
All
like
right.
literally
Nice.
people in my company call me like nandemoya, which is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
everything person.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because I've been under every single
You
department.
know
I've
it all
done
by now.
business, I've done business meetings, I've done estimates to clients, I've been on a commercial set, I've done everyday posts for our virtual humans, I've done captions, I've been a photographer, I've been a model.
Oh
It's
wow.
like I think I've literally done every single thing under
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
company. So I think everything would fit it better, but
Okay.
that doesn't exist.
Okay.
So I mean,
What
yeah.
What would take the most amount of your time right now, say?
Right now, I think mostly foreign international relations.
Okay.
For example, things like this, or talking at MIT, or going to LA to set up Complex Con, which was 2 months ago, and do a
Yeah.
whole booth and talk to people and give like talks there and stuff like that. I think would be my main priority right now.
Yeah, well, it's probably reflective of where the company's going. Like you just mentioned, what, three
For
years ago
sure.
you launched it with
Mm,
5 employees, and now you're up to about 50 or so. I mean, that
been
sort of
crazy.
speaks to the growth for one. And I guess, yeah, the interest in everything that you guys are doing
Mhm.
right now. So certainly, yeah, they're going to need a spokesperson for that and someone to take up that charge.
For
Okay.
sure.
All right. Well, it sounds exciting. Like I've had a lot of guests on the show, of course,
Mm,
and one of the commonalities, especially in this segment too, we always seem to uncover is that like when you're wearing a bunch of different hats, like and doing all these different types of tasks, of course, the stress levels are there, obviously, but also too, like the levels of enjoyment and fulfillment also
mm,
start to go up too. I think like you get involved with all these different elements, and you can start
mm.
to, I don't know, take a different level of like I said, enjoyment. Is that accurate? I mean, is that fit for you
For
or yeah,
sure. I mean, I've been kind of crazy over being bored with work
yeah,
all my life. I've just been changing and changing. I think it's my fifth year working after I graduate university, and this is like my fifth company, which is like
okay,
like
yeah,
I've been changing every single year,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah,
But like with the work I do, just because I do everything, I come into the office and I literally don't know what I'm gonna do. I could be
yeah,
wearing a motion capture suit. I could be talking to like one of the top brands of the world. It's crazy. And I think it
yeah,
fits with my personality because like I just really
yeah.
don't like doing one thing all day. Uh,
Exactly.
so it's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can appreciate that. I hear you. I hear you. I mean, even on this program as well. I mean, that's kind of the joys of doing this is like encountering people and
Yeah.
meeting people like yourself that are doing all these interesting things. And you're always like learning. You're always kind of like pushing boundaries, which is
That's
great. I can definitely
yeah.
appreciate that sentiment that you're
Mhm.
they're sharing there. Okay. Well, what would be like, this might be a difficult question considering what you just told me, but would you even have like a typical day or week? I don't know, month maybe? Or is it just so varied that it's impossible to say?
I guess a typical, I mean, like for example, this year we've spontaneously flew to like 3 countries, the US 4 times inside of
Wow.
that. And I think all of these have been decided like I think the longest was like a month before.
No way.
It's just
No way.
like I don't even know where I'm gonna be next month. Right now even. But I
Yeah.
think a normal day in Japan where there's
Mm,
nothing crazy going on.
yeah.
I would maybe have like 2 or 3 meetings. Um, Maybe half of those would be international. So
Okay.
maybe it'll be a Zoom or I will go somewhere to meet them, but we will mostly be like an English person
Yeah.
whether they're interested in partnerships or I just want to make connections and stuff like that.
Okay.
And the other half would be a more internal meetings, where we just plan contents or,
Mm,
plan, hey, we should approach this media or,
yeah.
you know, I
The
think,
strategic stuff.
yeah, yeah. Most of the things really like we don't really reach out from inside a company, which is I think most interesting thing about our company is like everything comes from the outside. Like we get like
Wow.
tons of emails every single day from like top brands and like everything. So like I'm literally sitting here like waiting for the next email. Like, okay, let's set up
No
a
way.
meeting. Like I'm literally not searching by myself, which
Wow.
is I guess
That's a unique
but
experience. Yeah.
yeah, that's also why I don't know what's gonna happen today, you know. I don't know who's gonna
Yeah.
email me.
Right, right, right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's exciting. Sounds
Mm,
super exciting. I can kind of like pick up on that, like just even how you're just describing it right now, like the tone
mm.
of your voice as well is kind of showing that too. So like, yeah, it sounds like an exciting company you're working for, and then also too, like just as an individual within a place like that. I mean, I'm sure there's challenges and there's stressful moments, but overall, yeah, it sounds exciting. Okay,
It is, it
awesome.
is.
I think it paints a really nice picture though for people too.
Hmm.
Maybe we could jump into a different segment here, though, actually,
Yeah.
Sarah. Something called Pathways. And this is a segment, it's kind of like it highlights this, well, this idea that like we don't always find our way into our present work like by this linear straight line, right? Oftentimes there's like left-hand turns, there's zigging and zagging, roundabouts, everything, you name it. And I think it's inspirational for one, like for listeners to kind of hear that. And it's kind of like, it's fun, I think, for guests as well to kind of like look back and to, trace their footsteps and how they ended up where they are right now. And in terms of your background, I find like what you're doing incredibly compelling and outside of even just the work that you're doing within the company. Like I mentioned this lightly off the top that you grew up, you had formative experiences within two different cultures, obviously Japan and Canada. You have background in art. Obviously, you found your way into business now as well. Maybe you could share a little bit more about your backstory a little bit and how you ended up where
Sure.
you're in.
For sure. I think in the end it all made sense. But I think when I was
Yeah.
starting, I would
Yeah.
never have imagined myself to be in the company. I think I didn't even
Right.
know that a company like this existed,
Right.
like
It probably didn't. Yeah, of course. Yeah, we
I
wouldn't
think
have,
many
right?
people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think looking back, it actually all makes sense,
Yeah.
which is kind of strange to me. But, I was born in Japan and then I moved to, I guess, actually Hawaii for a year,
Okay.
and then to Canada for 9 years, which
All
was
right.
all of my teenage years from like 8 years old to
Yeah.
18. So I
Wow.
think that's kind of where I built my identity,
Of course.
and yeah. And after that, I decided to go back to Japan by myself,
Yeah.
um, to university.
Yeah.
And at that time, I actually wanted to be an artist,
Okay.
which is strange to think now, which I still pursue personally.
Yeah.
But I think I had no imagination of what kind of jobs there were, And I think when
Mm.
you're like kind of premature, you're like, okay, baker,
Yeah.
artist, writer. There's like
Yeah.
all these things you see
It's
in
like a
movies.
half a dozen to a dozen exactly.
For
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be an artist. Like that's the thing because I loved drawing. Like that's all
Right.
I did all my life. That's
Yeah.
all I excelled at in high school as well. So I went to an art university in Japan.
Hmm.
I'm like, I'm gonna paint the greatest picture. I'm gonna go to a gallery and stuff like that. But as I
Yeah.
entered, because I could speak English and I
Yeah.
also kept my native tongue of Japanese, there were
Yeah.
not that many people that was bilingual, first of all, in
Mm.
Japan. And I
Yeah.
think in a younger environment, and also in the art industry as well. So I was
Yeah.
like a very rare figure. And I
Niche
was also like
down. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's no one. And I was kind of very outgoing. So I was like talking to all these people. And then
Yeah.
like opportunities just found me. Like in university, I was working at like NPOs doing artist in residencies,
Wow.
um, or working as an assistant to a class that taught like more like English related things. So I went to the States because of this Japanese grant that like picked these Japanese universities to
Yeah.
become like friends with
Okay.
US universities. So I like toured around the US and all of its art universities. And like
Good on
all
you.
of these things came at me just because I
Yeah.
spoke English.
Yeah.
And I think that led me to discover jobs outside of just being an artist.
Right.
There were like curators, there were like managers and all these things like that. This is so interesting.
Mm.
Um, and so I went to that way, I think after university. I did
Yeah.
several things. I did an NPO. I created my own artist in residency. with like 20 plus people from international artists coming to Japan, staying at my residency and making works. And then I did a gallery curation job at Ultra Super New. That's kind of where I knew Mark, that
Okay.
you interviewed before. But
Yeah.
then
Ad
COVID
agency.
hit, and then the gallery I was working at was closed. So I went to basically Ultra Super News SNS team, which
Yeah. Okay.
was dealing with clients and their Instagram accounts, basically. So there I was kind of doing similar things to what I'm doing now, where I'm taking pictures for like Lululemon or Dr. Dre and things like that. Which
Yeah.
was kind of the first time I was doing all those things, but it was still in the creative realm, which was I enjoyed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I came to this thing by surprise, actually. When I was doing the creations for the gallery, for International Women's Day, I curated this, not an exhibition, but it was more like a gallery talk where some of the female artists were showing on the walls, but then I wanted to do a talk. And
Okay.
at that time, coincidentally, Ultra Super New, which is an agency, was looking to use Ima for
Yeah.
one of their pitches. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I knew about Ima. I didn't know anything
Right.
about him.
Right.
And I was looking for people to join the talk. And one of the creators of Ima is a female
Okay.
woman named Yumi. She's amazing. So I invited her. I'd never met her before. I was like, can you
Mm.
come? Like, you do some cool stuff. And then I invited her. I was translating at that time because I'd done everything under the sun. I'm like, I'm gonna just translate for my own talk,
Yeah.
because there were English speakers, Japanese speakers, and then she
Mm.
came up to me later. She's like, "Hey, you do amazing translations," and that's where it started, which was really weird. It's
Yeah.
just like we're doing some we're expanding to international projects, and our CEO doesn't speak English. I speak it, but I don't translate. Like, can you translate
Yeah.
for some of the projects?
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure. So I did like freelance several times a week.
Right.
And that's where it started. And then they
There you
invited me to
go.
work. So I've
Yeah.
I've literally found myself here randomly and I love it. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like I don't know, like randomly, like I can definitely see that side of it, but also too, like it sounds like to me like you just put yourself out there so many different times and so many different like unique sort of
right.
like settings, like over and over again, in, in
Yeah.
in the best possible way that it just probably like attracted people to what you were doing and got them curious and I'm sure that was part of it too. But
And I realized that now it's kind of weird where it's like I read so many of these inspirational quotes, like just be yourself and you track things and
yeah,
stuff like that. But
yeah,
I think it's true. I was just being myself. I was saying
yeah,
yes to everything under the sun that interested me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
one of them just led to where I am now. So
That's funny you say that because I just had a guest on last week,
uh-huh.
actually, or an episode that came out, and that was one of her pieces of advice. And she was further
Oh,
along in her career, but it was just like
uh-huh.
just that. It's like saying yes to as many things as you can, especially the younger you are. Like
Oh,
as
for
you progress through
sure.
your career, maybe you might sort of like tone that back a little bit, but like
Mhm.
early on, just like yes, 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 and
Oh
just
my
you kind of
God,
figure
yeah.
it out along the way, and just opportunities just like blossom out of all of that.
I
So
totally agree. Like I
yeah,
always think I'm the most stupidest person in the room. I'm like, I
yeah,
don't know anything.
yeah.
Like I'm just gonna say yes. I'm gonna just listen to
Figure it out.
everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, because you don't know your destiny, you know what I mean? Like maybe the universe knows better than you. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally buy into all that stuff too. All those corny inspirational things too. I think there is some hidden wisdom in some of them at least.
for sure.
I'll go
For
that
sure.
far. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, let's jump on over into a new segment here. We kind of just
Hmm.
continues back and forth. It's the Q&A discovery. And I
Okay.
think this might be a nice point to transition into the company that you are working for right now, Al.
Hmm.
And as far as some of the like the service offerings, and you've
Right.
mentioned a couple times, I have as well, the virtual human, probably the most famous one, Ema, which is
Hmm.
if people are watching this talk, they'd be able to see her in behind you right now at the pink bob. Maybe you could describe the company. There you go. There she is. Yeah. Describe the company, describe her a little bit, and bring everybody up to speed if you don't mind.
For sure. So the company's name is Out. It started with the creation of Ema, actually. The CEO is a very creative mind. He was a film producer before,
Mm.
still is. He did like Jaden Smith's music videos in Tokyo.
Wow.
He did like some contemporary art stuff, like Sophie Cao from Perkin Gallery, like hijacking the Shibuya Scramble with
Wow.
contemporary art, basically. So like a lot of these big, like interesting projects he's
Mhm.
been behind of as a creative. And our co-founder owns one of the biggest CG companies in Japan. And they've
Okay.
done like realistic CGs behind, for example, Final Fantasy series, or bringing back a dead singer back to life, which is Misora Hibari.
Yeah.
And then doing a whole like live concert with this dead CG singer, but she looks super real kind of thing.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So kind of like when these two met, and they've done several works together before, but then they were
Mm.
all thinking about like creating a new IP
Yeah.
that they could own, that they could literally have every single freedom behind, because when you
Mhm.
own an IP, you're not working just for any other brand or working under, the market influence. You have your own brand
Yeah.
that you can do anything with, right?
Agreed.
And so that was kind of the start of EMA, where the creative was behind the CEO, and then the
Mm.
co-founder basically did the technology side. So it was like art meets technology, boom, EMA. And
Uh,
then they literally threw her out on the internet, like posted some IG pictures, Twitter photos, and I think it blew up
mm.
instantly.
Mm.
And then they were like, okay, let's make a company. So
Yeah.
it was literally like one of the experiments that they did that kind of blew up. But that
Yeah.
was really early in the days of virtual humans overall,
Okay.
which was around like 3 years ago. At that
Yeah.
time, no one knew what virtual humans were.
Mm.
Um, I think now it's a little bit more familiar with people in the field. There's like K-pop stars that's like being virtual humans, and there's like a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
different virtual humans coming from every single place in the world. But yeah, at that time, people saw her and they were like, "What is this?" So
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that time, we got like more than 8,000 organic coverages of just her. Like, and every
Yeah.
head was like, she's not real.
Right, right. Well, it's hard to tell again. Like if people are just listening to this, I certainly encourage them to go
Right.
watch the video for this and go check out some of the images. And you go to our Instagram account. I'll
Right.
have the links in the show notes to check it out. Because yeah, like if you had no idea of this conversation right now, you would not know. I'll put it out there, like you would not
For
know at
sure.
all.
I
And to speak to this point of her blowing up, I mean, I was just researching before this, like I
mm,
think on, well, you'd be able to tell if this is correct or not. It's probably even bigger than this,
yeah.
but in terms of followers on
Oh
Instagram,
yeah,
over 400,000,
for
nearly
sure.
500,000 on TikTok right now for
Right.
Ema. That's right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I
like,
think all the channels combined, including like these like
yeah,
other like Zepeto or like Chinese apps, I think it's for her only, it's like 1.6 million. And
for
for
her own.
all our virtual humans combined, we have like
Yeah,
around like six.
yeah,
It's 3 million. So I think people are very it's interesting because like
it
many of the
is.
people that follow her think she's actually real.
Yeah,
So when I
yeah.
meet people, they're like, "Where's Ema?" It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not just like photos as well. Like I went to the Instagram account as well. And like you
hmm,
have the videos as well of
right.
her in there. And then,
Yeah.
the comments as well, like her replying back and,
They're all
to
confused.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome though. But I can see like definitely the intrigue, the level of intrigue
Mhm.
and what that would do. And really interesting. And it's an interesting point too that you raise that like how maybe in the beginning, like people were sort of like shocked, I don't know, in
Oh
awe,
yeah.
surprised, I don't know. But
Yeah.
then now, over the course of the last 3 years or so, like that reaction now, like maybe for some people who don't know about this virtual human
Mhm.
influencer sort of like segment within advertising within that market, they'd still be surprised. But for others, they're like, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, oh, okay. Like it kind of speaks to that point of like where we're at with all of
Oh
this
yeah.
and with technology. It's really, really interesting if you stop and reflect on that. At least for me,
For
it is, I
sure.
think.
For
Yeah,
sure. I think
yeah.
people are getting more and more used to virtual identities in general.
Mm,
I always refer to, for example, like a Kardashian show, right? Or
yeah,
like Hype House or Terrace House even in Japan, right? Like
yeah,
these realities are all made up.
yeah.
Same as kind of like how even my Instagram or your Instagram maybe is a little bit more
Point.
prettier version of, or
It's a
like
good point.
curated version of my life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
who's to say like all these realities that we see as realities, they're
yeah,
fake, but
yeah.
they're also real, right? So I think when our realities, especially during COVID too,
Mm,
and also if you have like international friends, like all you see about them is their stories,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you kind
It's a
of feel
really
like
good point. Yeah,
yeah. And then I meet people after like 3 years, and it's like I feel like I've met you every single day because I
yeah,
see you on my story, right? Um,
yeah, 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 yeah.
Same goes for Ema, like people don't really care anymore if she's a CGI or if she's
Mm,
fake or real, whatever you want to call it. It's like
yeah,
it's one of the people you follow on Instagram that
yeah,
you enjoy seeing. It's literally
yeah,
there's no
yeah.
difference between her and many other virtual people. which includes you and me. So
Yeah, you nailed it there. And it's an angle I never would have considered until like you just sort of brought that up. And I think it really ties it together. It makes it like that divide, like
mm,
much less of a divide, almost like it's like we're the same, one and the same in that sense. Like,
for
right. It isn't
sure.
that difference between what we're doing and what Ema is doing. So yeah, that's really cool. I like that. In terms of like
Mm.
her in her projects, I know like she's mentioned or you'd mentioned that she's worked with some big brands and various interesting projects. Maybe you could shed a little bit more light on that and just give a couple of examples
For
to show
sure.
her sort of breadth.
So far she's worked a lot as a model, or
Yeah.
an ambassador. For example, she's been an ambassador for IKEA, Porsche, BMW. She's modeled for almost every single fashion brand under the sun. Recently we did Fendi, Diesel, some Chanel, and I
Wow.
think early on we did a lot of Louis Vuitton, Burberry. And I think many of these brands were very interested in
Mm.
using, I think, a high quality virtual human as well, because when you're
Yeah.
using, high fashion, you can't really have a face that looks like maybe like a Sims character or like a low
Right. Right. Yeah.
face, right? But she looks super real. So I
Yeah.
think that was one of our points when we were, working with a lot of these brands, that they really like the beauty
Yeah.
that was produced and the quality. Outside of just commercial things, a lot of things that I was also passionate about was doing a lot of art projects. For
Mm-hmm.
example, recently she was an ambassador for Aichi Triennale, which was an art triennale in Aichi Prefecture in Japan.
Okay.
So she was one of the ambassadors beside like Kuma Kengo and things like that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which was really interesting. Also, one of the bigger projects I was part of, I think last year, we did an exhibition in Diesel Art Gallery, which is in
Okay.
Shibuya. It's this whole like
Yeah.
beautiful space. I used to go there like every single month when I was in university. They contacted us, like, do you want to do an exhibition with Ima? We're like,
Mm.
yeah. And one of our ideas was that because our CEO is very versed in the Japanese culture and art community as well,
Okay.
we invited 13 of his friends who are the contemporary artists, to make works of Ima,
Mm.
inspired by Ima. So Ima wasn't
Mm.
actually, well, we could say that Ima was there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
basically they were like Japanese paintings of Ima, like wearing a kimono, like looking like one of those
No
traditional
way.
Japanese paintings. Or we also had this artist called Jiro, who also does like Murakami's works as well, like Murakami or like Billie Eilish's, like when her face is split up, or like
Yeah.
Murakami's bigger, like himself but as bigger
Mm.
sculptures. So he's one of the most like I think special effects artists in Japan. And then we had a big Ima face, which is in our office right now. It's like a 3 meter like Ima head kind of thing. And when you look into the eyes, you can see Ima. There's like a screen behind it, inside her eyes, and you can see her dancing to Dynamite by BTS, which was popular at the time. So I got
That's a
to
weird
like,
experience unto itself. That sounds awesome. Yeah.
yeah, so I got to work with 13 artists, which are a lot of people I also
Yeah. Admire
sorry, one of the
probably.
most famous was Yoshida Yuni. She's one of the most amazing creative directors. She did like Watanabe Naomi's works with her as well. And yeah, that was really fun for me.
Oh, I bet. I mean, I kind of returning to that opening segment, like I can see how your daily life or like work within this company is just so
Yeah.
varied, and to hit on some of these like interests that you hold yourself, and to kind of get to experience a lot of that in the work that you're doing. I
Right.
could see the level of fulfillment, just like especially on certain days, just like blowing through the roof for you.
It's
Yeah, it's
fun.
also
It's
also
fun.
exciting. Yeah, I guess in terms of just to paint an even clearer picture for listeners right now, like when Ema is involved in a project, it's not just still images. You might have like the CG and a video. Is there any other way that she's being expressed? Like you just mentioned the art, but
Oh yeah, for sure. There's many, many different ways actually. So
yeah,
there's CG.
yeah.
There is real-time CG as well, which is literally um there's many ways of creating Ema.
Mm,
One of them is actually real time.
okay.
So it's this so usually CG, if you think of things like Lord of the Rings or Harry
Yeah,
Potter, it's
yeah,
post-production. You shoot
yeah.
something with
I
these
think I know
like
where you're going with it.
green ass human and it turns into a dragon or something like that. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is you can literally have Ema on the screen in real time. So no after touching up. So that's a
Mm,
new technology that we developed recently. So that
Okay.
means we can do like live streams with Ema now, which is one of the
Okay.
next things that we're gonna continue to do. Another thing, aside from artwork, we've had Ema masks.
All right.
If you Google Tokyo Fashion Week doublet, Doublet, doublet is one of the brands in Japan.
All right.
We know the director behind it. And basically, there was a whole fashion runway where every single model, whether that be a man, a woman, also people in wheelchairs, people
Mm,
overweight, there was like a lot of diversity there, but
mm,
everyone had an Ema mask and an Ema wig. And then the Ema mask looked super realistic to the
yeah.
point where it's like people are like, wait, what's going on? Like people couldn't tell it was a
Yeah.
mask.
Yeah.
People still can't. That was really fun where it's like I saw like a physical Ema
Okay.
walking down the runway. But then you can also call it Ema because, like, she's an entity that doesn't have a body in a
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's almost all the ways. We
Yeah,
have.
like as when I was introducing her off the top and what she does and what the company does, like this blending of virtual and reality, like it's becoming so immersive that it is getting harder and harder to tell, like discern these differences now, and it just makes it also fascinating to kind of like sit back and watch it all unfold. So yeah, yeah, super
For sure,
interesting
for
stuff.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, I understand the company itself, aside from like all the projects that you're involved with, is also involved in the research of virtual humans as well. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Research, for example, I think the thing with virtual humans
Yeah.
is that we've only seen literally the first page of what
Yeah.
virtual humans can do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think right now it's like, to put it very flatly, it's like being an influencer.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're still literally like being an influencer or being on Instagram, that's literally like a gist of what could happen. And I think we always talk about what could happen, and we're always developing technology to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And the thing with virtual humans is that it fulfills one of the human's most prominent desires since ever, which is transformation,
Mm-hmm.
transforming to something. I think it's prominent these days as well with plastic surgery or makeup or
Yeah.
drag queens,
Mm-hmm.
clothes, fashion, like everything that we do daily is to be the self that you want to be. I think
Yeah.
every single person in different forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, but as humans with physical bodies, there's always a limit. There's always a limit to how much you can alter your body, even with
Right.
hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And but looking at realities like the Matrix or Ready Player One, there is a possibility beyond the physical self, which is your digital self.
Yeah.
And what that allows us to do, and what I'm so excited about when I talk about this in my company, is like Ema allowed, for example, someone inside, to
Mm-hmm.
be Ema.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, for example, let's say I was Ema.
Yeah.
I can say love and peace on my Instagram, right? But let's
Mm-hmm.
imagine a virtual human looking like Ema saying love and peace on her Instagram. It's like a whole different way of
Yeah.
amplifying your message. And
Yeah.
I think, for example, if every single person in the world could have a virtual human looking like anything you want to be
Mm-hmm.
beyond your physical limitations. For
Yeah.
example, an Indian boy can look like an old man. An old man can look like a BTS character. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many possibilities. Like a
Mm-hmm.
mental health technician that looks like, a typical technician can look like a BTS member and spread messages about mental health.
Yeah.
There's so much that we can do beyond just fashion, Instagram, and everything that we want to make possible. And that's why we're developing technology beyond just Ema, that
Yeah.
allows every one of us to be a virtual human.
Yeah. 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 And I guess that sort of like speaks to this point, this tagline on your website that I,
Mm.
found. It was like, we believe that virtual humans can change the world. And I think what you just said sort of like encapsulates that sentiment perfectly, right? You're changing the relationships that people have with one another, with themselves, like it allows for this to take place. And like you said, I mean, it's not just limited to just influencer marketing. This is probably the tip of the iceberg, if anything.
For
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
in a couple years or a few dozens of years, I think like virtual human would be something that we'll see every single day, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to argue with that. It's really hard to argue that with, with the metaverse, with all these different things also evolving, at the same time too. I mean, yeah, it's interesting to consider what our world's going to look like in 5 years, let alone 10, 15 years. It's
For
hard
sure.
to
For sure.
fathom. So, and also exciting. Okay. Well, maybe we could skip on over into this middle segment, something called a water cooler story. And here I just have, guests and indulge listeners with a story related to their profession. I'd love to hear what you have for us today.
Right. Um, just any personal story.
Yeah, anything that's memorable that stuck out to you or sticks out to you right now, or
I mean, I always question what I do. And that's like, I think that brings a lot of emotions. I think it's just very like personally, I think the reason why I love art,
mm,
um, and the reason why I'm sticking with this job so long is all the same. I think one my life's passion has always been art. And the
mm,
reason why I love art, or for example, when I look at art, or why I go to museums every single week, is that in life, I think I like to ask myself why. For example,
mm,
why does war happen? Why do we love each other? And I think when you look at an artwork, you always ask yourself, like, why did this painter paint this? And then you
mm,
look at all the colors and you kind of think of an answer inside your head.
yeah.
When I looked at Ima for the first time in my life, I had one of the most strongest emotions because
Mm,
she looked so real to me that
mm,
I felt so many things that was right and so many things that were wrong. For example,
yeah.
ethical questions, right?
Right.
But
Right.
over
Right.
and over, I was like, why?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
couldn't find an answer that I was satisfied with. I still can't.
Yeah.
Which I think, for example, when I look at a painting, I can kind of figure out in like 5 minutes kind of what I
Right.
think
You
about
come to a
it,
conclusion at least where like
right?
this is where I think I sit
Yeah.
on it.
And
But
then you
yeah.
move on to the next painting.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
with Ima, I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, what's
Yeah.
going on? Like, what's up?
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the point of like this level of intrigue that we were like chatting about earlier, is that I think like that's what gets everyone, quite frankly, is that like if what you were just explaining right there is like exactly how I felt. And like you've been immersed within
Yeah.
her world. And like for me personally, I discovered her maybe a couple of months ago, I suppose. And then I started researching for this and, lined up this talk and this, researching for this conversation as well. But like all the while I was doing this research, I was just like, same thing. I would like look at her, the Instagram, I'd look at this, I'd read this article. And same thing, you'd just be thinking about this, like, what does this mean? Like, I still same thing. I
I
can't come
still
to a
don't know.
conclusion here, but like the level of intrigue is through the roof though, and it hasn't sort of dissipated, which is really interesting.
Sure. And I always like, I think if you look at it from the outside, like I think a lot of my art friends would be like, you left art for technology or things like that. But to me, it's like, it's literally the next form of art. Where it's like
Yeah,
you look back at art history, like for example, like cave paintings, you would have
yeah.
like berries looking like cows, but then you would see a cow, you know what I mean? And then you
Mm,
move on to like the later stage where we see Mona Lisa, it's
yeah.
still paint, but then you
Hmm.
feel emotions from it. You literally see somebody. And
Yeah.
I think the next stage after that is literally CG person looking so real,
Yeah.
and kind of mimicking life, even to a
Hmm.
sense that they're using the same platform that I, as a physical human, use,
Yeah.
which is Instagram.
Yeah.
And we're on the same page, literally. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like me being inside a painting of Mona Lisa.
Right.
So, like to me, it's still continuation of art.
Yeah.
And
Who's to say that's not art? Of course.
for
Yeah.
sure. So I think that's kind of the reason why I am so invested into this, because I think this is the newest form of art that can beat every single contemporary art.
Yeah.
You created a life,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's one of the strongest emotions I feel every single day when I'm working.
kind of brings to mind like, right now, of course, I'm sure you're being within the world of art and immersed within it. You'd be familiar with this too. I mean, like this whole controversy of like AI produced, works of art. It's
Yeah,
integrating digital elements into it
for
all.
sure.
But again, like it's a reflection on society and where we're at, and like the
Mhm.
the, the use of digital technologies, like it permeates our life. So like, how can anyone say, like, this is at least my opinion, how can anyone say like some of these things are or are not art? Like it's part of
Mhm.
our life and our existence. So, and it's a reflection of the way we see things, the way we interpret the world, the way we're living our lives. So like it sort of like fits in for me at least, it fits in this basket of like, well, I don't know. I mean, art, as you just sort of alluded to, is continually evolving, and this is just like the next representation of it, perhaps. So, yeah,
Oh
I can
yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, that's why I love when people question me about this, because I'm always
Mm,
like thinking as myself as well, like a lot of ethical questions, I get from like MIT or things like that. Like
yeah,
I'm so hyped up when I hear things like that, because I'm like, me too. Like I'm also wondering. Yeah.
yeah. That's cool. That's cool. All right. Well, maybe we can skip on over into this last segment here, Sarah. It's a crystal ball segment, as the name implies. I mean, we're looking at the future, trends, predictions, so on and so forth. And we're just kind of speaking about this point right now. But maybe we could return to this point. And you touched upon it earlier, like in terms of the evolution of, virtual influencers or this virtual technology, essentially. Like, where do you see it going outside of the world of influencer marketing? Do you have any
Mhm.
insights on that or thoughts?
Sure. I think they'll be, to put it frankly, I think they'll be human in a sense that,
Mm,
for example, even like humans are becoming digital,
yeah,
like who literally knows if the Kardashians' lives are literally what we see it as, right? So
yeah,
what's to say that, Ima, when Ima was chosen as one of the influential woman of the year, that was really funny to me. And I think in the future for virtual humans, Ima can literally be an opinion leader.
mm,
In a sense that you'll see like Greta, you'll see like Emma Watson, and then maybe you'll literally see Ima, because I think there's a lot that Ima can say about us. She's a
mm,
human,
yeah,
that was created by humans.
yeah,
And I think we're facing a lot of things like the virtual identity thing. We're thinking about, like how we deal with media, or like how mass media is changing into, every one of us following different people. So now we have like different facts,
yeah.
or things that we feel as fact, or like even like fake news. It's so interesting,
Right.
just fake news.
Yeah.
And just things like that. I think Ima is in such a weird position of being between the real world and the virtual world, because I think she's
Mhm.
not completely virtual, because we
Yeah.
perceive her to be on the same page as us. So
Mhm.
I think she's literally the only entity that's in between those two worlds.
Mm,
And I think if you go too much on both ends, we're not really, I think it's not relatable to this day and age, because like we're
yeah.
all like mushing everything together, all these realities. I think she has
Mhm.
a lot to say about that.
Mhm.
So I'm very excited for her to, be somebody, not just a model,
Yeah.
create her own thing. She's actually creating her new virtual fashion collection right now,
Okay.
which is kind of exciting for us. But beyond that, I want her to lead a group of community, and inspire people, which is
Mhm.
one of our goals. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the possibilities are endless. They literally are endless, right? Like social issues, you could get involved in those types of points or those types of things, take up certain opinions or stances on particular issues, even political ones at some point. Who knows? I mean, like like that slate is, it's open. It's available for whatever you want to draw on it, So I think it's exciting. It's exciting to say the least.
Yeah, like
So
imagine her being a politician. That's like the most ethically weird thing you can imagine. But you never know. Like
that's true,
maybe
right?
governments will be AIs, and maybe they'll need a face. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I must say, I mean, this conversation, this time has just flown by. I can't believe we're already at like the 45-minute mark here, but it speaks to volumes of all the insights that you've shared today. And like, it's just been such an enjoyable talk that I'm sure listeners are going to just be like eating up and loving all of it. So I thank you immensely for your time, Sarah. It's been such a pleasure.
it's been amazing on my side. Thank you for all the interesting questions.
Yeah. Well, for those interested in learning more about Sarah and, of course, Al, you can go to the website. You can also check out Ema on Instagram and TikTok. I will have all the links in the show notes. And, of course, too, if you like today's show, please be sure to share, and stuff counts. It really does help a lot. And rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcast. And the biggest thing I think to do today is to go over to that YouTube channel, because you're going to want to see some of the imagery associated with this talk. I mean, we've referenced it a couple times, Sarah and I, But to really get a good feel for what we're speaking about today, you really need to see this. So yeah, I encourage everybody to go over to YouTube. And if you do, I mean, you'll see I just launched that channel last year. It needs a bit of love. Hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot. And then finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.